Good evening, dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of the Daily Debate. I'm Muhammad Abdurrahim. Tonight we'll be talking about the just Palestinian cause and specifically about the situation in the Gaza Strip, the occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and the Egyptian role in supporting the just Palestinian cause, the historical and current Egyptian efforts to reach a ceasefire, to deliver much needed aid urgently, especially to Gaza, this strip that has been barbarically attacked by the Israeli occupation for over 100 days now. The Israeli occupation army having killed something in the vicinity of 26,000, 27,000 and counting. Many more, several thousand are lost, and some 70,000 have been injured. Of course, many more lost their homes. And by the way, most of those who have been killed and injured and who are lost are civilians, and most of them are children and women. So we'll be talking about that. Of course, the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and the Egyptian efforts, the diplomatic efforts, the humanitarian efforts, and all in bilateral diplomacy and in multilateral diplomacy, in the presence of His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Miligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, a man who served in his diplomatic career in Israel as well. So good evening to you, Ambassador Miligy. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And dear viewers, first let's watch a report on the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, and especially the impoverished Gaza Strip and the Egyptian efforts to support the just Palestinian cause, and then come back and start our discussion. Please stay with us.
Since the onset of the Israeli war on Gaza, Egypt has been pushing for a ceasefire in the war-torn Strip and sustained access to humanitarian aid to alleviate the suffering of the people in Gaza Strip. Egypt is persistently working towards reaching a ceasefire in Gaza, despite Israel's imposition of unreasonable conditions has made it currently unattainable. According to the presidential spokesman in a phone call held last Monday between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the president updated him on Egypt's intensified efforts to effect a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as the ongoing initiatives regarding detainees exchange. President al-Sisi emphasized that Egypt's efforts aim to protect the civilians in Gaza who are enduring tragic humanitarian conditions, underscoring the need for the international community to exert pressure to implement relevant United Nations resolutions. In his turn, the German Chancellor commended Egypt's constructive role in the region as he discussed regional developments. Also last Friday, President al-Sisi held another phone conversation with U.S. President Joe Biden and Qatar's Emir to discuss the situation in Gaza, with the discussions focusing on joint efforts to establish a prolonged humanitarian pause in fighting in Gaza. In addition to Egypt's continuous diplomatic efforts, the country received on Wednesday 29 Palestinians comprising injured and oncology patients from Gaza via the Rafah crossing to be treated at Egyptian hospitals. The new batch has been admitted to various Egyptian hospitals, including El Arish Hospital, Sheikh Zayed Hospital, Suez and Ismailia Medical Complex, and El Hayah Hospital in Port Said. It's worth mentioning that Egypt has repeatedly rejected mass expulsions, which would liquidate the Palestinian cause, dash hopes for a two-state solution, and pose a threat to Egyptian national security. President al-Sisi always asserts the importance of reaching a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and the entry of the largest possible volume of relief aid to meet the living needs of the Palestinians in Gaza and reduce their sufferings.
Thank you very much, dear viewers, for staying with us back here in the studio with Ambassador Medhat Miligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister. So, Mr. Ambassador, first of all, how do you evaluate the overall situation? I want to speak about the humanitarian situation, first of all, please, in Gaza. despite all of the efforts, the efforts by Egypt, the efforts by some members in the international community.
By the international organizations as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
who signed all of them. Yesterday, a document stating that the situation is catastrophic and we are turning into a hunger situation with the Palestinian now, and that so far the humanitarian aid can't enter. There's still a lot of negotiations with the Israeli side, and I think today maybe the situation is very stagnant. I mean, besides from the continuous bombardment from the Israeli side towards the Palestinian, where they even attacked the hospital today, which is not new to their policy. And but I think maybe I just hope that the new initiative launched by Egypt along with Qatar and the United States will bear some fruits. I mean, we heard some positive reactions from the Palestinian side, although not yet very clear from Hamas and the Palestinian resistance as a general, and from the Israeli side. But I think that it's promising. We are talking primarily about the release of 35 of the prisoners, the Israeli prisoners in Hamas, which of them might be many low-ranking soldiers in the Israeli army. And in revenge, Israel will release between 100 to 200 Palestinian prisoners from its dungeons. And we hope that this will be accompanied with a truce that might last for 2 months.
Right, but how did this? But we've seen truce before. I mean, or at least.
But not that long.
Yeah,
maybe
of course.
With this length, maybe we will see that this is the first stage of a long-lasting peace, ceasefire.
Okay, hopefully, of course. But so let's go back to something you said. You were talking about the continuous Israeli bombardment. This is my question. The Israelis were always talking about like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and going to different phases of their attack on Gaza. And when we follow the number of Palestinian civilians killed every day, it seems to be very consistent. I mean, it used to be 300 and then 200 and then 150, and it seems to be around 150, 200, so they know what they're doing. The question here is, I mean, and the Americans have said more than once that, too many Palestinians are being killed. We want to see this number go down. We don't know what number the Americans want to see, but I just want a comment from you on this. So what has changed in the phases? Because the Israelis themselves had announced that they will use smarter bombs, so on. They will diminish the number of civilians that will kill. And they're
we hear different
hundreds of civilians every day.
different numbers from both sides. But what I want to specify here is the American position.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally trust only what the Americans do and not what they say. Because actually what they say is not always consistent with what they do. Sometimes you even see the exact opposite. I mean, when the Americans are talking about that the number of Palestinian civilians casualties is too high, and then they don't vote for a ceasefire. So exactly what message are you giving? It's always confusing when it comes to the Americans. They give very good speeches. The American administration, they're always in favor of a Palestinian state. They're always in favor of a peaceful relation between Israel and its neighbors. They're always in favor for peace talks between the Israeli and the Palestinians. But at the end of the day, what they are doing, which is the reality, is most of the time the total opposite of that. They do not really work, or as the American proverb will say, they don't put their money where their mouth is.
Yes.
And
I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, so I'll let you comment on that. But I remember also a resolution at the United Nations where the Americans were pushing for, and that's the one they didn't oppose, and it was supposed to ease the entering of humanitarian aid and to make the process easier, but it seems it hasn't at all.
Well, let's go to the root. The root is, how does the system work in the United States? It's totally different from ours. When a senior official in Egypt take a decision, it's based solely on the best interest of Egypt. In the United States, it's not always like that. It's about votes. It's about ensuring his place into the next elections. And if any official of the United States would call for something that is against the Israeli wish, he can be sure that he will not be elected for a second term or the next term. And this is a very, very scary thing, because actually the strength of the Jewish lobby is extremely strong, so that no one can dare to oppose it. And this is the serious problem that we're facing. That's why I think we've all seen, I remember perfectly, and this is a very important signal, when I heard recently former President Carter and former President Obama talking about the Palestinian issue, it was really very positive about the two-state solution and about the right of the Palestinians and about the human rights and about everything. What did you do when you were in office? I mean, you did not work for that, especially when in the case of President Barack Obama. I mean, he was not really for a Palestinian state in his acts. So it's quite obvious that once that you leave the office, you leave the obligation, you don't need the Jewish lobby for anything anymore. You can start talking and talking the reality and the truth.
That's why when we see a seemingly positive from the point of view of the Palestinians and the Arabs and the Muslim world, a statement regarding the Just Palestinian cause, we automatically just look at the screen. Oh, former official. We expect that this,
the title.
yeah, the title is former official,
Exactly.
and not current official. So, Mr. Ambassador, also, we hear also about the two-state solution, as you heard, but I mean, the Israelis on all fronts now, the current prime minister and former prime ministers, and even those who were not described as hawks, nobody in Israel is now talking about a two-state solution. I mean, they don't want Palestinians to exist as what, you know, I don't know.
I believe that most of the countries and the governments who are talking about the two-state solution are just giving a lip service. According to me, and luckily I'm not official anymore, I'm talking on behalf just of myself and my point of view as someone who lived in Israel and served there, served my country as a consul in Israel, and had several contacts with many Israelis, of course.
Which years were those?
This was during the Second Intifada. So it was in 2004 at this period. And I stayed for quite some time, I mean, for over 4 years. But what I want to state here is that when it comes to this two-state solution, right now, at this moment, at this juncture, I think it's an illusion. It cannot be done. But actually, there is no other formula that was proposed. So everybody is still talking about the two-state solution, as if nobody stopped to think about it. How is it going to be? I mean, Israel have swallowed most of the lands of the West Banks, and they have annexed it with a series of settlement that you may call
internationally illegal.
And I would like to quote Gadon Levy, who is a very, very prominent Israeli figure, and at the same time he is totally for the Palestinian state. And he said the following: Israel was never ready for a two-state solution. Actually, they wouldn't have invested billions of dollars into those settlements that they were dismantled a few years later. It is impossible that those who built those settlements ever had the idea of leaving them one day. And this is the major hit to the two-state solution. We are always talking about the two-state solution, but actually never performing what would lead to a two-state solution. So what I think, and this is my personal point of view, and I have always preached for that, is the one-state solution. I know it's very hard to think about it because the Israelis don't want it, because they want a Jewish state.
Issue,
And second, even the Palestinian wouldn't want that because they know that there will be a second-class citizen in this state. But I think this is the only solution that could really be something, which is a two-state solution, democratic state with equal rights for all its citizens, whether they're Arabs or Jews, and where everybody is enjoying their freedom. But it will not be a Jewish state. It cannot be called a Jewish state. Israel did not leave enough room to discuss the two-state solution after all the land it have annexed. unless it is really willing, and it has to speak
dismantle
clearly that
these
we are ready to
settlements.
dismantle them.
Yes.
Israel never spoke about dismantling any
And go back to
and
the
go back
borders
to
of 67.
the borders or 67 that we are always talking about, with East Jerusalem as capital of the Palestinian state.
Yeah.
So, and what about the refugees? What about the status of the Palestinian who lives inside Israel? And so many very, very tricky issues that were never discussed. But we are always keeping the big emblem, which is the two-state solution. But I don't see it happening. I don't see it possible even.
I understand you very well. I mean, in Oslo, for instance, even these key issues were not discussed, and Oslo led to nothing, without even discussing the major points.
Exactly.
So, Mr. Ambassador, dear viewers, allow us first to watch this report, and this is about Egypt's great efforts in trying to alleviate the humanitarian suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza. Let's watch this and come back and continue our discussion.
This week, during talks with Western leaders, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi appealed for serious political action to push for a ceasefire in Gaza and greater access for humanitarian aid. According to official statements issued by his press office, President al-Sisi also called for a clear path to Palestinian statehood. In this regard, the head of state received a phone call from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, discussing the important role of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, UNRWA, in helping the Palestinian people. The spokesman for the presidency said the call reviewed the overall situation in the Middle East and the danger of expanding the cycle of the ongoing conflict. The call touched on the Egyptian, regional, and international efforts aimed at reaching a ceasefire, exchanging hostages, and delivering relief aid to the Gaza Strip in large quantities at the soonest time. The two sides discussed the pivotal role played by the United Nations and its various organizations in providing support and relief to the people of Gaza, especially through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Refugees, UNRWA, and the importance of continuing to fund it in order to perform its humanitarian role. President al-Sisi welcomed the role played by the Secretary General of the United Nations to push for calm and delivering humanitarian aid. Guterres thanks Egypt for its key role in working to achieve calm and provide humanitarian support to the people of Gaza, stressing his keenness to continue coordination, consultations, and joint work with President al-Sisi to restore security and stability to the region.
You're still watching the daily debate, and we're still talking about the just Palestinian cause. Mr. Ambassador, a lot of developments are happening recently. One of the most important, I guess, recent developments was the Hague's verdict on the case presented to it by South Africa. Could you tell us, you know, the significance of this ruling and the effect, the short-term and maybe long-term effects on various domains, the political one, the I don't know, the military one?
Well, first of all, for the first time, we have a legal document that states that Israel could be committing a war crime, which is the genocide, which is one of the worst crimes. Of course, when they signed the treaty in 1948, they were just coming out of the Holocaust and what happened to the Jews during the Second World War on the hands of the Nazis. And actually, one was supposed to think that whoever was treated this way would really be careful treating others. But unfortunately, what we are seeing from the Israelis is not very far from what they have been subjected to during the Second World War. Anyway, now that they are a signatory country of the of the crime against humanity, of genocide, the Israeli now there is a document, a legal document from The Hague stating that Israel is indeed might be committing war crimes. And the judges ordered Israel 6 orders, among which they have to facilitate the entry of the humanitarian aid and medical aid and so on. And the most important one is not to initiate or to even help with the committing genocide, and not even to incite genocide. And I think that this is a very important document, not just for what it represents against the state of Israel, but also for the implication of that and repercussions regarding, of course, medium and long term.
Public opinion worldwide.
Not just that.
Diplomatic
the
pressure.
allies of Israel, the countries who supported Israel, are also
embarrassed.
Well, not just embarrassed, they're accomplished with the crime, just like Israel. I mean, just like in regular law. If you help a criminal to commit a crime, then you are as guilty as he is. And this is one of the major problems that the Western Bloc is facing right now. It's the balance between what they have been preaching all the time about human rights, and they were even defending Israel from this point of view, that this is Israelite to defend itself, right, as we always heard. And from now that Israel is being incriminated by the International Court of Justice, which is the highest legal body of the United Nations, which represents the conscience of the world. So now there is this dilemma between what we've been doing and what can happen now. I mean, during the last years, during the last decades, it wasn't a secret at all that many countries were just stating that how they helped Israel and what kind of arms they gave Israel and what kind of munition they provided Israel and so on. And everybody was talking about it freely. And no one, not one, dared to say that they are helping the Palestinians. I mean, the whole narrative of Israel is now falling down. And I think that we have to embrace a new narrative if Israel wouldn't abide, that we have to help the Palestinians now to defend themselves. I think this is a narrative that is worth to be studied.
Indeed.
Why? Because this is what we've been doing with an exact similar case, if I may call it so, which is the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Exactly.
What happened, there was an aggression from one country against another country. Of course, the Palestinians are not yet a country, but anyway, they are an entity. Yeah. And I mean, legally, we cannot call it a country, but it's an entity.
And legally, those who are occupied have the right to defend themselves.
According to the international law. And yet, and I really want to remove the embarrassment from the Arab world, who didn't actually give any arms to the Palestinian. And I think it's very simple, because we strategically believe in peace. And that's why we don't want to give either side any weapons to continue this war or to wage a war on the other party.
Right.
But the West is totally in favor of waging a war against the Palestinians. That's why they are embarrassed today with this new thing. And that is why, I'm sorry, this is one last thing, that is why when Israel just spoke about a certain accusation that some, and they are no more than a dozen, of employees of the UNRWA, which is the United Nations organization to help the Palestinian refugees, they might be implicated in the 7th of October attacks. And imagine how many countries just withdrew their support for the organization.
Follow the American way, yeah.
And not just that, and this is actually helping Israel in its collective punishment against 2.3 million Palestinians.
Friendly countries, by the way, to the Arab world,
yes, exactly.
Most of them, they were talking, they're the ones who talked most about the urgency of sending humanitarian aid and appealing to Israel to allow more aid and calling on the UN to do more.
Let me say something, please, here. I mean, we are totally capable of feeding the Palestinians. What we are asking you is to stop the aggression against the Palestinians.
Absolutely.
It's not about feeding them to die in a perfect shape. It's about giving them the right to live, giving them the right to be free in their own country.
Well said, Mr. Ambassador. Allow me to say, allow us to take another break. Dear viewers, we'll be back to wrap up this edition of the Daily Debate, tackling the just Palestinian cause.
على عهدي على ديني